Hi, everyone. This is Tom Salemi of Device Talks. Welcome to the Structural Heart Talks podcast. My guest today is Dr. Todd Brinton. He is Corporate Vice President of Advanced Technology and Chief Scientific Officer at Edwards Lifesciences. Todd is so well known in the medical device industry. He had previously been at Stanford Biodesign. He was a co-founder of important companies, including Shockwave Medical. And he brings a great story to the table, and we're literally sitting at a table about not only MedTech, medical device development, but also his own career and the path the course he set, and the efforts he took to achieve his own dreams. So now he's at Edwards Lifesciences. He's helping to develop new products and new ideas. We'll talk about that process at Edwards, about how they incorporate different perspectives in new product development, and it's a terrific look inside. So I know you'll enjoy this conversation. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Integer, and I'm going to hand the microphone over to my colleague, Managing Editor Kayleen Brown, for her conversation with them.
John Cooney, Vice President R&D at Integer, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Kayleen. Delighted to be here.
Well, I'm really excited to learn more about Integer. So, John, with that in mind, can you please tell us about Integer?
Integer is one of the largest contract development and manufacturing organizations in the medical device space. We partner with a lot of the structural heart OEMs, offering end-to-end solutions that span the full product life cycle from early development right through to high-volume manufacturing.
Speaking about your global network, we actually heard that you recently invested in your Galway, Ireland facility. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so we have expanded our Centre of Excellence in Galway and invested in the facility where we have a dedicated innovation suite for customers to come and visit. It's right beside a rapid prototyping lab, which is beside a pilot line, and is in the same corridor we have a manufacturing clean room. So this enables us to do development and rapid prototyping right through from start to finish, all under one roof.
Well, huge congratulations. I'd like to shift specifically to structural heart. Can you tell us about your capabilities around structural heart?
Okay, so in the structural heart space, we support the development and manufacturing of some of the most complex delivery systems and implants that are on the market today. We offer a lot of specialized solutions that are all tailored to meet the demands of our customers in this very fast evolving field. I would also note that our expertise expands beyond structural heart. It also includes therapeutic areas like electrophysiology, neurovascular, peripheral vascular, and we bring that cross-disciplinary insights and expertise to the fore when we apply all of that combined expertise to products and solutions in the structural heart space. Ultimately, this ensures that we develop solutions that meet our customers' needs and create safe and effective solutions for everyone.
So, John, can you tell us about Integer's prototyping capabilities and how it benefits OEMs?
Yeah, so prototyping, and specifically rapid prototyping, is an essential step in the development cycle. At Integer, we've really honed our capabilities to meet the needs of the OEMs who really value speed and precision. As I said, we operate on a local-to-local model where we have prototyping centers of excellence geographically positioned close to our customers. I mentioned the facility in Galway already. We also have some facilities in Minnesota, and specifically in Plymouth and Chaska, where we have significant R&D teams with very strong talent focused specifically on the structural heart market. In those facilities, we've partnered with many customers in structural heart and have brought exceptionally complex delivery systems all the way through from early development to commercial success. Like I said before, we have R&D labs, pilot lines, clean rooms, all of the facilities under one roof to make those successful centers of excellence for structural heart.
That's really terrific, John. Thank you. We're going to take a brief break from our interview. with Integer to bring you Todd Brinton of Edwards Lifesciences. But before you do that, please take a moment to visit Integer's website, www.integer.net. That's INTEGER.net.
Todd Brinton, welcome kind of back to the podcast. It's great to talk to you again.
Thanks for having me.
So you were one of our first higher profile guests on Device Talks Weekly. I talked to you in March 2020 when, I don't know, there was some stuff going on in the world.
Before the end of the world?
Before the end of the world, yeah. And I played that interview as a commencement address in May when we got the podcast rolling out, because there was just so much, there were no commencements because of COVID. And there was it was a great interview. There was chock full of wisdom, life lessons. I'm going to send it to my son because I re-listened to it this morning for the first time in a couple of years. And I want to draw to it from just a little bit, but I think people should go back and listen to it. Just talking about your path into MedTech, how you were given the choice of being any kind of engineer you really wanted to be from your family of engineers. Like you told the story of your father was an engineer, your grandfather's an engineer,
yep,
and how you became a biomedical engineer, which you just said you wanted to go into life sciences. And your father declared, great. You could be a biomedical engineer. I'm recounting the whole episode. You didn't have to say a word today. But I wanted to pull a couple of things. Number one, you talked a lot about mentors in that episode and how influential they were in helping you make life decisions. Did you go out seeking mentors? Do mentors seek you? I wonder how you look at mentorship. And what advice would you give to your kid or a young colleague about finding mentors, because they had a big influence in your life?
No, it had a huge influence on my life. And I think probably, for most, and certainly was for me, my original mentors were my parents. Mm-hmm. I made the joke about my parents and in engineering, my dad being an engineer. And I said, I was really interested in biology. And he said, great, biomedical engineering. But they both are and continue to be today incredible mentors. So I think some you get just by connection, and some you have to seek out.
Yeah.
I think it is an active process, but I'm not sure you should be thinking about it as I'm going to seek a mentor. Mm-hmm. I think you're opening yourself up to learn. Mm-hmm. And I think you try and find people. So people you admire, you want to seek out and see if I can learn from them. And it might just be a quick meeting or talking to them or saying, hey, do you have a few minutes for a cup of coffee? That's how it starts. But yeah, I think it was a big part of really my development. It really meant a lot to my career. Mm-hmm. I was very fortunate to have, and very diverse mentors, by the way. I had clinical mentors. I had business mentors, strategic mentors, legal mentors. So, depends on what stage I was at in my career. But I think for those that are thinking about it, I don't think you could say, I'm out to seek for a mentor.
Right.
I think you need to take advantage of the people you're around it, and with a curiosity to try and think about learning from someone else. And I would say that most people are I was very much concerned and timid about seeking out mentors. I think it just starts with a quick email or hey, do you have 5 minutes? Do you think I can ask you some questions? Everyone likes to talk about themselves.
Yeah.
So mentors do too. So if you ask them something about what they're doing, they're usually going to be willing to answer, as opposed to, hey, I've got this problem. Can you give me a solution?
Right.
Ask them about them.
Right.
And I think that's how it's building a relationship.
That's great advice, because I'm telling my son about that. He's 18. He's reaching out to people, and I tell him, like, people do like to talk. They do appreciate those emails. They're kind of flattered when someone says, hey,
Sure.
Could I talk to you for a few minutes? How do you were a professor at Stanford. You've obviously had success in the medical device industry. You're working at Edwards now. You must get a lot of reach out. I wonder how you approach being a mentor now, because I'm sure you are to many.
Yeah, so I think I do get a lot of reach outs. I can think of one that just happened a couple of days ago, and the answer is I try and pay it forward the same way people did for me. So someone sought out and said, I'm interested in this, and I connected them. It takes time. You connect them with, hey, I think the person would be great for you to connect with is this person, because most of the time people are just trying to find their way, and I might be the right person for them. It might be someone that they're interested in, they're not sure what they're looking for, and I try and take the time to actually connect them with someone I think is more appropriate. Other time is taking the time for a phone call.
Right.
And I think that we all have a responsibility, because people did it for us along the way, to take the 15-minute phone call and say, hey, what are you interested in? How can I answer for you? How can I connect you with somebody else? Mm-hmm.
That's great. So just drawing one more thought from that interview, your move from you become an engineer. You actually had worked on a startup. and you were at a point where you were wondering whether or not to go to med school. Can you just share sort of that moment in your life? Because looking back, to me at least, it seems like probably one of the most primary forks that you've taken or choices that you've made. What went into the decision for you to go into medical school, and talk about that process a bit, because there was a lot of stick-to-itiveness in the success that you've ultimately found.
So it was a big shift. It was a big risk because I think we all get comfortable that we finally are finding our way, right? Like I started to feel comfortable as an engineer. Okay, I know what I'm supposed to be doing. I mean, I'm not there yet, but I kind of feel like I know where my goals are, where the target my career is. And you think, oh no, let me shift and go right. So yeah, it was formative. I think for me, I wanted the opportunity to be challenged. I really wanted the opportunity to grow, and I think the only way I was going to do that is by taking on things that I was uncomfortable with. And so the idea of going back to medical school, I was, like many, caught up in the idea of, am I going to be behind? I'm going to be too old. I'm going to be older. And the answer is, probably was a little more atypical in med school, but in the end, when you get to, it doesn't matter. No one really cares. It's only you that think that you care. So, or that others care. So I think that was definitely one big decision. I think when I look back, people say, oh, wow, you're an engineer, you decided to go to medical school. It was a big decision. It wasn't really like, hey, I want to compliment myself with medical school skills. It was more like, wow, this is uncomfortable, but it was always exciting to me. I always thought, the idea of being a physician and in practice was really exciting to me. So the other message is pursue what's passionate to you. Pursue your passion. Don't be afraid. And the biggest thing is, I think we're so much afraid to fail, and that failure is the path to success. You usually have to work your way through failure. Hopefully those failures are smaller, not huge, but usually you're going to have to find your way through failure to get to a success. I think we have somehow this idea, the Cinderella idea, that things just happen and all of a sudden it's all great. You figure it out, you have success, and wow, that's amazing. The things that supposedly I've had success with, people go, oh, it was great. There was lots of failures before that led to the idea, and I don't think I ever would have made those things if I hadn't have actually had the experience of failing at a number of them before.
In the talent, you actually had applied to med school's first year, you didn't get into any, and then the second year you applied to twice as many.
Yes.
And you told the story of your flying to Chicago and basically making your case face to face. Do you look back, when you look back at yourself at that age and the tact you took to go to the school and maybe you can give a few details in your answer. What do you think of that person who did that young person who did that? It must be a very proud moment, because it took a lot of courage and a great deal of moxie to go there and speak directly to the school that you're hoping to get into.
Yeah, I think it goes back to mentors.
Yeah.
I had a mentor, Tony DeMaria, who was the chief of cardiology at UCSD at the time, who's been a world-renowned cardiologist that took the time for me to say, you know what, how bad do you want to go to med school? And I was like, I really want to go. And he goes, well, then you need to get on a plane and go out there. I would have never done that if Tony hadn't suggested it. So again, I trusted that someone who, I was too timid to do that, but I trusted that he had my best interests. He really cared, and that's why I did it. And so along the way in my career, I've had similar other things where I probably wouldn't have done things, where mentors said, this is time for you. You need to do this. And I trusted. And those things made a big difference. And that's why I think mentors do make a big difference.
That's amazing. Let's talk a bit about failure in overcoming fear or not letting fear stop you. Because in your career, you were an engineer, then you went to med school, then you went to Stanford where you're a professor, now you're at Edwards. You've made a lot of pivots. Do you find a point where I'm feeling comfortable, I need to do something different? Is it something conscious that you think that goes on, or are you just always looking for a new challenge? How did that, looking at your career, explain it to me?
I think.
What are you doing? I mean, it's working out. It's great.
I think explain it to you. Wow, that's a tough one. I think I look back at now and people go, wow, that was really interesting that you chose those things. I didn't choose them for any of the reasons you mentioned. I chose them mostly because I was interested in pursuing the challenge. And probably the last few, it was the thought of, if fear was going to scare me out of it, I needed to take it on.
Yeah.
And I think that was the case when I went to med school. I think it was also a little bit the case, to be honest, in coming to industry as opposed to being an entrepreneur. I had felt finally in my career, my clinical practice was, I felt very confident about, felt comfortable with. I had a great role at Stanford in biodesign. Shockwave at that time was still small, but I felt we were getting ready to IPO. And so I thought, well, things are going really well. Why would I want to take the risk of something totally different? Mm-hmm. And that comes down to another, a mentor, which Mike Basalam became a big mentor for me, which was the decision to go to Edwards. And I think that was, I cannot let fear of failure be the reason I don't do it. Mm-hmm. And so, I made the decision to come to Edwards 5 years ago, and I have had no regrets ever. I mean, it's been an incredible, the journey's not over by any stretch. We're just starting the journey, but it was a great decision for me.
That's great. Before we get into your work at Edwards, you mentioned Shockwave. When we're recording this, the news broke a week or two ago of the J&J's interest in it, and I assume the deal will maybe have closed by the time this runs. What does that whole story say to you, or how do you feel about Shockwave? I mean, this is a company you helped start, you helped lead for a time. What is your connection to that company now, and what are your feelings about this outcome? We'll say outcome.
So it feels really good, in the sense that it was we would call it a latent, unmet clinical need. People did not believe that calcified coronary disease was a big enough problem to solve. It was an uphill battle. No one thought it was a fundable company. It took several years to get it funded. It took friends and family money. It took my dad wrote the first check for the company.
That's amazing.
And yet, you look at it now, people go, oh, it's obvious, such a huge problem. But, it's a good example. There's lots of examples like it that we see things every day that we take for granted that we don't think are significant enough big clinical problems that are worth, solving, that don't warrant the type of resource behind them to actually bring great ideas to solve. And, I think we built a very good foundation. It was a great partnership, Daniel Hawkins, myself, John Adams, through the early years. It was fundamentally trying to solve and identify the details of a real strong unmet clinical need. I think it was a brilliant solution that was put together, the idea of using lithotripsy inside a balloon. The idea was deliverable, flexible. It really met what operators needed, and it was really driven on my own experience that, rotablation and others were a great technique for certain types of lesions, but for a lot of operators had a lot of risk, and they felt uncomfortable with that risk. And the fiddle factor, and also the fact that when you picked up the rotablator, the staff just lost it. They were just like, oh, God, this is going to be hard. It's going to be long. And so you kind of knew we need something different. So I think we built a good foundation. We built, I think there's a lot of ways to fail a company. People talk about the thousands of ways to fail. One of the bigness is you're not really taking on truly an unmet clinical need. There's lots of management things and such that went along the way. I think, the team we put together was really strong. I was there, from when we started, 2008. We didn't start the company until 2009. It IPO'd in 2019. I was there the entire time as the CMO. And I was consulting for the company. I wasn't obviously an employee of the company. I was still at Stanford full time. But I think that the team that really has taken it since that time, there was some really talented people. I mean, it was a journey. It was a team. Doug Godshall, who we recruited to be the CEO in 2017, did an incredible job. But he brought in some really talented people. And it was a shared mission, which was really to change medicine. And I think when you get that kind of momentum on a problem, it creates a lot of excitement. And I think that credit all the momentum to what you saw ultimately with J&J's acquisition.
How do you, and we can speak broadly or specifically about Shockwave, but you mentioned all the investors that said no. How do you not let a series of no's stop you? Is it just something inside of you that you know it's a good idea, it's going to ultimately find success, you're ultimately going to find supporters? Is it something you can't quite explain that's inside of you? Is it just a stubbornness? What is that thing that just won't let the no's stop you?
So, I mean, it's the $1 million, maybe $1 billion question,
$13 billion question.
but no, I think it is. It was tough. I mean, there was a lot of external factors into that. I mean, obviously 2008 was a really difficult time.
Yep.
The markets were really difficult, so it made some additional challenges to trying to get financing early. But I think there was also some great years of growth in there too, where the markets were really frothy. So, I think it got the benefit. Any good innovation that does this is going to, be 10 to 15 years, it's going to cross some ups and downs in the market. There's never a time it's going to be in a rich area. So you got to make it through this, the good times and the bad times. I think we were very fortunate. I think there was a good amount of luck, to be fair. Great people, great team. I think that there was some really, really critical people along the way, not just on the team, but I think of Fred Mall, who really came on board, that really helped it, was our first chairman of the board. Antoine Papernick, who came in, Antoine beat me up for 9 months of diligence. What I think ultimately was the reason that he came on board was he saw the hunger and the passion for the problem. The team was willing to do whatever it took to solve it. And that, to this day, I think, I still am very close with Antoine. I think that was a compelling part of why he ultimately thought, this is something I want to fund, because it's something I learned from him. Investors don't fund projects, they fund teams. And so it's the team and the project. It's not just a group of people. Investors have trouble with a group of people without a project. On the other hand, I think it really is truly a combination of both. And so whether you're doing that on the outside or you're doing that in the inside in a big company, you have to have the team and the idea, the hunger, the passion for the program and how it fits into the strategy. So I think you need both of those to get the drive to actually get a good clinical program going and ultimately drive to getting something to patient care.
Now we'll take a quick break from our conversation to bring in a message from our sponsor, Integer.
And we're back with our interview with John Cooney, Vice President R&D at Integer. So John, can you share with our audience what value Integer brings to full structural heart procedures?
Okay, so Integer provides a very comprehensive portfolio for structural heart procedures. We have a very strong, full spectrum of solutions that positions us as a single source partner for many OEMs. We have our recently expanded guidewire operations in New Ross, where we produce many high-performing guidewires. Some things like we have fixed curve guidewires that are used specifically in the TAVR market. I mentioned our Minnesota site, where we have some specific structural heart development and manufacturing. But we also have our Oscar portfolio of off-the-shelf introducers, sheets, dilators, which help OEMs accelerate their development cycle, because we can tweak these OEM offerings to meet our customer needs and accelerate time to market for our customers. And I think the other really important part of Integer's capability is our depth of our vertically integrated supply chain. We have a very robust supply chain offering precision machining, braiding, coiling, pull wire assemblings, laser cutting, film cast liners, extrusions, all of these things which are key components for manufacturing catheters, complex delivery systems within our network. So we control very much of our own supply chain, which enables speed, agility, and manufacturing excellence.
I believe that you've made some acquisitions in this space. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, so we've made some very strategic acquisitions in recent years, specifically the Oscar acquisition, which I talked about earlier. We've also purchased Pulse and Iron Biomedical, which provide innovative solutions in the structural heart space. So again, it's all part of our commitment and investment to the structural heart business.
I love hearing that, John. And again, congratulations on your recent additions. Shifting back to structural heart, what are you doing in the structural heart space to provide innovative solutions?
Innovation is central to Integer's approach in the structural heart market. We recognize this is a field that's advancing very rapidly, and we're expanding our capabilities to reflect that. The strategic acquisition that I mentioned earlier, like Iron Biomedical, that team brings with it expertise in biomaterials, textile-based medical implants, some proprietary coatings, which are all critical to the structural heart market and how we develop solutions for our customers there. Beyond acquisitions, we also foster some collaboration with suppliers and technical universities to ensure our tech roadmaps align with our OEM needs. This approach allows us to really deliver solutions that are not only relevant today, but they're also equipped for everybody's future needs.
Excellent. Well, John Cooney, Vice President R&D at Integer, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Kayleen. It was really enjoyable to be here with you today.
And to our audience, partner with Integer today to elevate your innovation and accelerate your time to market. To do that, visit integer.net. That's integer.net. And once again, a huge thank you to Integer for sponsoring this episode of Structural Heart Talks.
So let's talk about that, moving that innovative drive to a corporate setting, because I want to understand your role as your corporate vice president of advanced technologies and your chief scientific officer. We can cover sort of your duties under both, but bringing that innovative drive, it seemed to me that if you're leading a small company, that its very survival and your potential very paycheck depends upon its success. That's a primal sort of driver. How do you replicate that at a larger company like Edwards, where certainly a unsuccessful outcome is disappointing and could be hurt some careers, but it may not be as primal. How do you kind of instill that same drive in a larger company?
So in the startup world, we call it strapped to the rocket, right? You need someone who's really strapped to the rocket, that their whole livelihood is tied to the success. And even then, we know it's really hard and most things fail. I think that what unites folks, particularly Edwards, is mission. Mm-hmm. I think that there is a real important element to the culture at Edwards that's about really trying to change medicine and change the medicine for the patient. Mm-hmm. And whether you're an engineer, clinician, science, you're in finance, HR, everyone's united on the goal of we really want to change the way that we take care of patients and really improve care. And so it's not the fact that they're strapped about their livelihood. They're strapped in a sense of the mission, which is so important. We're willing to sacrifice the other things to try and actually meet that mission. Mm-hmm. And I know that seems a little bit, Cinderella-ish or a little fairy tale-ish, but I believe it's true. It's what I felt here that Mike created and that Bernard has continued to grow, is the mission becomes a big part. And whether any part you walk on campus here at Edwards, you're going to see people, just the way they interact, it seems different. They're not here clocking in and clocking out. I think they have a different approach to what they're doing. The goal really is to change medicine and structural heart.
We'll talk a bit about advanced technologies. How does it pursue innovation, and how does it fit within the larger fabric of Edwards?
Yeah, so we have I would say we have 5 business organizations really at Edwards. Our critical care business, our surgical business, our largest legacy, older business, TAVR, TMTT, and then advanced technologies. For the first 4 are commercial business units, with commercial leaders that are pushing forward. THV, our TAVR business, and TMTT really were incubated in a kind of a format of advanced technologies, which is a resource that's really seeking to go outside the existing business lines. Now we have AT and the goal, and we made this announcement in December, our mission in kind of broadening the definition of structural heart, this idea of valvular structural heart and non-valvular structural heart, and the goal that we think they're all encompass interventional heart failure. And so the goal to really go into the heart failure space in non-valvular, and that's really been the big focus of AT since I got here. My goal, I trained in interventional cardiology, I practiced, I spent a lot of time in heart failure at Stanford, was to really try and take what we've learned in treating valvular heart disease in structural heart and transition it into the big opportunity, which probably is larger than all the valvular diseases together, which is heart failure. The idea of treating heart failure reduced ejection fraction, heart failure preserved ejection fraction, and all the other associated things that are really in the structural heart space. And so that's really what we've been doing in advanced tech. So as opposed to thinking as an extension of TAVR, the next generation TAVR business, or the next generation mitral or tricuspid, those really exist within the current businesses. It's really outside. It's the white space. And so, same thing as I said before, most things you work aren't going to work. But we're pretty excited about a number of the things we have coming out. Some of them starting, our investigational program, APSURE, which is shunting blood in a very different way than what's out there before. That's one thing that people can see, but there's a lot of things behind that aren't public yet.
Just broadly, help me understand what non-valvular technologies or devices might look like. Are they something that's inserted? Is it energy that's applied?
So I would say that anything's on the table for us. I think that I tried going back to my biodesign training at Stanford, which is I'm solution agnostic, but things that feel like they fit better with Edwards are really implantable therapeutics. And so I would say they look more like an implantable device. And so Apture, an investigational program, is a shunt that actually goes from left atrium into the coronary sinus. Placed interventional. It's done by interventional cardiologists. It's referred by heart failure doctors. So it kind of fits in the current flow. It's a device that's actually long-term. It kind of seems similar to a valve implant, but it's not. It's not a valve implant. It's something completely new, and it's creating new physiology, brand new physiology. So we're not following a surgical predicate like has been done in the valvular space. We're now going into new spaces. So again, new opportunity, new challenges.
Well, if you could, help me understand how, like take me to a day at Advanced Technologies. How are these new ideas being crafted? Are you throwing a bunch of young people in a room with a whiteboard with I don't know, plastic hearts, and they're kind of poking it and figuring stuff out? I'm sure it's more technical.
You've seen what we've been doing.
Yeah. How are you developing these new approaches? And are the people in that room that I just made up, maybe there's no room, are they the ones being strapped to that rocket? Like, is someone at that early stage saying, okay, it's yours, take it? How do these projects advance?
So a couple different ways. So I've taken some of the things that I thought were useful from what I learned in early stage development, some of the programs I worked on, and some of what I learned at Stanford running the biodesign program. I think that these programs are best fit from the foundation when they're collaborative relationships between engineers, clinicians, marketeers.
Okay.
You really need people of that think differently, different backgrounds, their experiences. The more diverse that group is, the better, because you need that group to reflect what our patients look like. And so you start with that. The days of kind of having engineers sit in the room, which is kind of this idea of, hey, we all speak the same language, we'll get there faster. I don't think you come up with the best ideas. I think you need to be challenged by the idea of bringing marketing folks into the room and, in this case, something we didn't do before, which is clinicians in the room. We always knew that clinicians' input was critical, but the idea was we usually went to them. And so we developed something, take it to a KOL and say, hey, what do you think of this? And they give us feedback. We go back, we design the next generation, we take it back to them. The reality is that cycle needs to speed up.
Okay.
Where the engineering cycle is faster. We have 3D printing and all these capabilities. It used to be you had to machine a new thing and it took weeks. Here it takes days. And so the clinical input needs to run at the same cycle. So I think the biggest thing is you need to bring that clinical acumen into the room. And you need to bring that clinical acumen that's open to new ideas. So my belief is it's important to have those really senior advisors, the KOLs of the world in cardiology and other fields, but it's also important to have people that have clinical knowledge but are not so kind of shaped that they're willing to take risk and think outside the box. And so we have a program here that we actually teamed up with CRF, the Cardiovascular Research Foundation. We bring clinicians in early into their career, put them in the room with our engineers and marketeers and take on clinical problems that are totally brand new that no one's ever worked on before.
Wow.
And so that's where we're incubating some very outside-the-box ideas. And then we have basically a translational program. We take things that have come out of the incubator or things we've looked at, and we kind of develop them further, potentially marching them to early feasibility. And then we have clinical programs, just like you can imagine, like Apture as an investigational program is running a clinical trial, randomized sham control trial. Those all exist within advanced technology because they don't belong to a business yet. Down the line, we'll then have the challenge of thinking out where do they go, or do we form another business? And that would be kind of our conceptual idea. The other thing that we're doing, I think, which complements that, is that's kind of our incubation strategy, is we've kind of a much broader exploration strategy, which we're looking outside. So the things we discover, needs that we think are worth solving, we then go outside. So I have a team now that's totally outside the organization. In other words, they don't see what's going inside the organization, that basically works with KOLs, works with universities, works with startup companies, and tracks what they're doing. Because I think what made Edwards so special is we're very mission focused on structural heart, but the idea of whether it comes from inside the organization or early outside the organization, we want to build it together. I think the thing that Edwards has done really well is evidence, right? Development, engineering, and evidence. So we may take programs that are outside, bring them into Edwards, and grow them as part of our ultimate long-term strategy.
I want to explore that in a minute, but just going back to the marketing folks. Marketing folks are in there. What are they bringing to the conversation? Obviously, they're not thinking of a name and branding at that point. They're helping you understand why this might work, why someone what do they bring in the conversation? why don't I let you answer the question rather than try to answer myself?
I think in this case the business folks are thinking about, it's not about dollars, it's thinking about the market. Market's people, it's patients, it's technologies, it's also the flow of care, where the need is. So reimbursement, payment, all those things become a big part of the business questions that are associated with a particular project. So, it may be that there's lots of clinical needs out there. The question is which ones warrant spending the most resources on, and the resources have to match the opportunity. So I think that scaling the amount of resources you put into them and understanding the flow of care, value becomes one of the most important elements of understanding if we can deliver something that's important, that not only is going to be innovative, but with the healthcare system adopt it. Can it fit within the system we have? What are the constraints on that? So, for instance, we could say we've got something that's a solution, but ultimately it's going to take too much to get there, too many resources, too expensive, that the system, it's not a big enough problem that kind of fits. On the other hand, we don't need to bring too much technology to a small problem. So I think that really that element of marketeering and business is important, of scaling and understanding value, as opposed to the clinical perspective, which is about clinical results in physiology, or the engineering philosophy, which is really about boundary conditions and trying to solve the problem.
Right. Now, it seems like the marketing folks would ideally bring the insights that a venture capitalist would also bring to.
Very much so. Yeah. How do you think bottom line? What is the thing that's ultimately going to drive value? I think that's the way venture investors think about it. It's the way we expect from marketing folks to think.
Interesting. And let's talk about the external focus, or the external operation as well. So what are those folks looking for? Are they looking for small companies? Are they looking for researchers at universities? Are they looking for something else, and then all of the above? What are they out there on that for?
So I would say that in the space that we've kind of formed, we've got specific ideas that we want to solve. So our incubator has looked at needs that we think are warrant solving it. They try and solve them with internal programs. That same list we share with our external team and say, here is a license to hunt. Go shop for solutions that solve this without being able to see inside the organization. So they're clinically relevant, unmet clinical needs that are value-driven that we may not be able to solve with the team we have, but someone may have already solved externally or be in the process of thinking about early intellectual property. So we're going to universities, we're going to KOLs, we're going to early startups. If they have a great idea, it's a great way for us to partner, because the biggest thing is we've identified in the structural heart space an unmet clinical need that warrants being solved. And so whether our team solves it or they solve it, doesn't matter. It's how do you actually get it to patient care? I think people get caught up in the fact of who invented it. Invention is it's an important part, but it's a very, very narrow, small part of the innovation process, right? There's a lot of inventions out there that never get anywhere. And they're some of the most brilliant inventions. So it's really about the team and capability to take that innovation and take it all the way to patient care. Because ultimately, all the work in the world that doesn't get to patient care doesn't matter.
Interesting. Final question, kind of recapping to the decisions you made in your career. You left Stanford, which arguably for biomed is kind of the show. It's the majors. It's like nobody leaves
certainly
it.
Is. Yeah.
But you talked to Mike Musalem. You covered this in the podcast that we'll post the link in the show notes, about how initially the headhunter reached out to you and they weren't asking about you but asking for names, and then ultimately it came to center on you. My question to you is, what was it about Edwards, about this opportunity that convinced you to retire from the majors or leave the majors and take on another challenge? We hit upon it a little bit earlier, but specifically, what was it about this opportunity? Because I have a feeling that you might not have made the same decision if another company came calling, that this was a very Mike Musalem and Edwards specific decision.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, I'm a cardiologist at heart. I love cardiovascular. I love the opportunity to take care of cardiovascular patients. I love the structural heart space. A lot of it was Mike. He was very compelling. But Mike represented the culture here and the people here, the drive and the mission. And so when I got here, and it was a process. It wasn't one phone call with Mike at all, but it was also walking on campus and really being struck, and then interviewing with folks, talking. I did my diligence with a number of folks. And then going to my mentors and said, what about this opportunity? And I thought they'd go, what, you want to leave Stanford for? And they said, you should take it. The opportunity, Edwards is a very special place, and I think that the mission's really, really important. The mission and the culture here is important, and I think the opportunity to really impact patients in a very, very special way with more resources, and that was really the upside for me, was having more resources and making a bigger impact on a bigger scale. That's what ultimately, was probably tilted the scale to leave an incredible place like Stanford.
No, I believe it. All right, well, it was great to visit with you again and to hear your story. Thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks very much for having me.
Okay, well, that is a wrap. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of the Structural Heart Talks podcast. Thanks, of course, to the fine folks at Edwards for hosting us at their offices and making their key leaders available. And, of course, thanks to our episode sponsor, Integer. If you could do us a few favors, we'd be very grateful. Please subscribe to the Device Talks Podcast Network so you don't miss a future episode of Structural Heart Talks or our other great podcasts. Please share this episode on LinkedIn. That's a great way to spread the word. Please give us a ranking on your podcast player and a comment if you'd like, so we know how we're doing, and that also helps spread the word. Finally, and most simply, if you connect with me on LinkedIn or Kayleen Brown or both on LinkedIn, we'd love to be part of your future MedTech conversations. Also follow Device Talks while you're at it. So thanks so much for, again, being part of this episode of the Structural Heart Talks podcast.